What is the worst case of psycho-overprotective parenting that you've ever seen? Story 1. I went to high school with a guy whose parents had a camera installed in his room that fed into a TV screen in their bedroom. When he told me, I assumed it was one of those things they used when he was a baby, then disabled when he was older. Nope. According to him, they still kept it on 247, even though he was like 17 years old. I'd never been so creeped out. Story 2. My aunt won't let her kids open their own soda cans because she thinks they'll cut their fingers off, which was fine when they were young, but they're 15 and 18 now. Story 3. My ex's mom screamed in my face legit inches from my face that I was stealing her son away when he bought his house. It was his decision to buy a house, and he had wanted me to live with him. The location of the house, you ask, directly across the street from where his parents live. Story 4. I had an ex-boyfriend from high school whose parents were very strict about him dating. So we always had group dates. We weren't allowed to be alone. We went over to his house for a movie night, and everyone all of a sudden left, but it was super late, and my dad's place was across town. So I called for him to pick me up, but it was going to take 45 minutes to get there. His parents made me wait outside on the porch alone in November. In Canada, it was cold. He wasn't allowed to wait outside with me. They didn't even let me wait in the foyer with him supervising. Story 5. My former roommate's parents were extremely protective of my roommate. Once I woke up to 3 calls and 4 texts from her mom asking if my roommate was in the room. I replied back yes. Later that day, my roommate explained to me that there was a girl murdered in North Carolina that fit her description, and her parents wanted to make sure she was alive. We go to school over 400 miles away from ANC. Story 6. Girl at school wasn't allowed any sugar, no sweets, not even fruit. It was weird. I invited her to a party at mine, and her parents came round before the party to check her house was safe. They asked if our gate locked to keep people out. It wasn't fair on her, though. Every birthday or party, she'd eat tons of junk food and feel ill. And she used to crawl around the classroom pretending she was a cat. I think they broke her. Story 7. My first boyfriend in high school practically lived at our house because my mother refused to let me go to his. He was over every day after school and most weekends. Finally, I convinced her to let me drive myself to his house. At this point, I had met his dad twice, and his dad thought he did something to offend me, scare me off, because I never came to visit them. I really wanted to go hang out with him and his dad. So I drove myself to his house, with the condition that I call my mother immediately upon arrival from their phone. Google Maps said it should take 8 minutes to get there. 8 minutes and 45 seconds later, I get an enraged phone call from my mom. I was just walking in the door, and I hadn't called her yet. She made me immediately return home and grounded me from my cell phone for a month. Story 8. I was taking a general chemistry lab in college, and a parent emailed me after the first lab report with an annotated copy of the graded assignment, which I gave a B. Little Johnny had never gotten a B in a class before, and I was just being unfair since it was his first semester in college. Long story short, she threatened to go to the prof. I said go ahead, and they did. The professor was awesome. When kids about their grades, he offers them a regrade, and then goes over the report with a fine-toothed comb. The B got changed to AC. Edit. The student was the one who ultimately asked for the regrade. Would he have asked for one if his parents didn't make a stink? Maybe, maybe not. It doesn't matter. Part of being in college is learning how to take responsibility for your actions. And there's a reason professors rely on TAs for grading freshman lab assignments. Their time and attention is better spent elsewhere. Asking the professor for a personal regrade must carry downside risk. Otherwise, everyone would ask for one every time. Please feel free to question the grader on anything. That's part of their job too. Just make sure you have a solid case before requesting a formal regrade. Story 9. One time when I was about 6, I was playing on a playground. Anyway, I went down this tube slide thing. It was totally covered, and this little girl walked in front of it. Well, surprise, surprise, I hit her. Her mother got super mad at me and told me that I should pay more attention in the future. I was on a slide. I had a friend growing up whose mom refused to send out a Christmas card with her and her brother's photos on it. The mom was convinced at the end of the season, once people threw away the cards, the garbage man or anyone rifling through the trash would see her amazing, beautiful children, find the address on the discarded envelope, and come kidnap the kid from their home. She did many other bizarre things, but that one always stuck out to me. Story 10. I once dated a girl with absolutely insane parents. Throughout middle and high school, they refused to let her go out to anything but school and choir trips. She had to argue and bargain with them for months just to be able to go to senior prom. They wouldn't let her go to junior prom. They also refused to let her get a driver's license or a car, to limit her mobility. Even to this day, they refuse to let her go out. She, a 20-year-old woman, has to get permission from her super restrictive mom and dad to go out for coffee at the cafe downstairs. The worst part of all of this is that she can't move out, as they have hold of her passport, and where she lives, it's more or less impossible to get anything done without it. Edit. To all of you talking about the legality of withholding her passport, I don't know for sure whether it is or not. The laws where I live sometimes had really backward policies. I have advised her to try to take action escape many, many times, but for personal reasons she has decided not to. I disagree entirely with her choice, but it's her choice to make, not mine. Edit 2. While I love your guys' concern and willingness to help, I will not be giving out information that could be used to identify her, for reasons listed in the above edit. So please don't ask. Story 11. On my friend's 13th birthday, his big brother was taking us paintballing. We said bye to his mom. She was, in full disclosure, a severe paranoid schizophrenic who liked to go off her meds. Anywho, we left the house and headed to paintball. At a random gas station a good half-hour away, we stopped for snacks. When the older brother goes inside, the mom pulls up to a screeching halt next to us, rolls down the window, and starts yelling at us to make sure the older brother spends all the money on paintball, rocking the crazy eyes the whole time. She leaves by rolling around to the back of the gas station and idling there. When the older brother got back, we told him what was going on. He told us to buckle up. Sure enough, we pulled out of the gas station, and she starts to try tailing us. I say try because next thing I know, we're on the freeway doing at least 100, dodging from lane to lane, till we found a quick off-ramp that took us under a bridge where we hid for a few minutes to make sure we had lost her. The older brother refused to let her ruin my friend's 13th birthday. He was a good dude. Story 12. I once went to bed with a very beautiful girl who happened to be homeschooled as a child until she was 13 before she went to public school. It happened 3 separate occasions that we were in the middle of fooling around, and then she would just hit a wall and stop moving forward, and so I would stop. She explained the attitudes that she grew up with about, and she would just clamp up and be on the brink of tears, and I would just be telling her it was fine and not to be embarrassed. It just blew my mind that at 24, this beautiful, young, well-traveled, educated woman still couldn't be physically intimate with someone past a certain point because of some mental block her parents had instilled in her. Shit's weird. Parents need to stop teaching their daughters dumb about. If not for the sake of their self-confidence issues, then at least to stop cock-blocking me. Story 13. A girl I know didn't get the talk from her parents until she was 18 or 19. Her mom had decided that if she didn't know, she would keep her virginity forever or something. Story 14. My first roommate in college was extremely coddled by his mother, or at least I thought so. His home was about an hour away from campus, and she came up every day to get his laundry and make his bed, clean his side of the room. They were both neat freaks, and I wasn't a slob by any means, but I wasn't quite as neat as either of them would have liked. What ended up happening is I would come back from class and find her making my bed, organizing my desk, and picking up my dirty clothes. Didn't really appreciate that, but I didn't want to make waves, so I just kept my mouth shut. Finally, it got really weird when I came back to the room after a class had gotten canceled, and they were both in the same twin bed. He was sleeping, and she was stroking his hair face and singing him a lullaby. Story 15. My wife's mother. Too many acts of lunacy to mention, but the one that sticks out was when we went to their house for a family barbecue. We were in our mid-20s. Mom decides to start a fight over my presence, as I wasn't family and thus should not be attending. Wife says if he's not welcome, we're leaving. Mom says, no, you're not. You're grounded. Wife just gives her this tilt your head sideways look and says, we're going back to our house. Story 16. I work security at a college, so I've seen my fair share. This wasn't so much overprotective as it was babying. I once had a mother call our office. The exchange went as follows. Mother, hello. Can you please go tell my son's professor that he won't be in class today? He doesn't feel well. Me, where's your son? Mother, oh, he's there, on campus, in the dorms. Me, ma'am, I don't know who your son's professor is, and even if I did, it's his responsibility to get in touch with them, not mine or yours. Mother, oh, I know, but he called me and asked me to call him out of class. Me, he's in college now. He's 18. He can do this on his own. He doesn't even need to call. He can email his professor. Her laughing year or so, right? Story 17. I know someone who just moved into her college dorm a couple weeks ago. This girl has never had a house key as her mom wouldn't allow it. If she wanted in the house, mom better be there. Her parents also have all of her social media passwords, and her mom openly states she used to go read the chat conversations. Not as bad as others. However, the girl has already been home one weekend and is set to come back in a few weeks. We're all wondering how she'll rebel once she's under the college experience. This girl's brother, who is in middle school, maybe just started high school, is worse. He is so coddled that he freaked out when he was left in a waiting room at a doctor's office alone while his uncle went back for his appointment. The kid could not be left alone. For the record, neither kid has special needs. Story 18. Wife grew up in a quiverful family. She was only allowed to wear ankle-length skirts. No movies at any time. Only parental-approved books, Pilgrim's Progress, the Bible, theology books. No music except for classical and hymns. In order to date her, I had to court her. That involved never being alone, her parents inviting themselves to our anniversary dinners. Siblings repeating every word that we said back to her parents. I gave her a goodbye hug, and her mother yelled at her, calling her a loose woman. When she finally gave up and ran away, they chased her to her car screaming and tried to block her in the driveway with a tractor. Story 19. I graduated high school a year, and a few months ago, a good friend of mine was a freshman my senior year. Now she's a junior and taking college classes at my college. She's not allowed to talk to me because I graduated. She still does in person, but not as much as we used to be able to. Story 20. I don't know if it's the worst case, but I take my 2 kids to the park, 2 and 5 years old, and get the side eye from moms like I'm hovering over their kids on the playground. No, I have to make sure my 2-year-old doesn't decide she's going down the fire pole. Stop treating all dudes like pedo lurkers. Story 21. I got one. My sister once told me about this one time when she was at a beach house with her friends. They were all over 20 years old, and they were planning to stay there for the weekend. Obviously, they were going to stay up all night watching movies when midnight strikes. This one girl's phone starts to ring, and it was her mother telling her to go to sleep. Worst part, she silently stood up and went to bed. She is over 20 years old. Story 22. I don't know about the worst, since my parents were pretty good about other stuff, but anything to do with was a major no-go. I remember them trying to give the talk to my oldest sister, who was 8 or 9 at the time, making me 4 or 5. We got to the part where the guy puts the thing he pees out of into a hole I was not aware existed, and I ran away screaming. That subject was never revisited. They pulled me out of middle school ed because it was too early, and my high school taught abstinence. I thought that all, not just child pornography, was illegal until college. Story 23. When I was in college, I was dating a girl, and had been for some time. My dad lived in another state, and we had made plans to go visit him, so she could meet him for the first time. The day we were supposed to leave, like 2 hours before we left town, she got her grades from her college. They weren't as good as her parents wanted, so they grounded her. I went to her house to try to reason with her mom. I should have bailed at that red flag, but I was in love, and her mom was so condescending. I explained how my dad and stepmom had made arrangements for her to be there, and how excited they were to meet her. She wouldn't hear it. I made the mistake of saying, I understand that you're upset, but deciding this right before the trip just seems childish. I was banned from their house. We were actually together for a long time after that, but I know they're still really overprotective, and she's really dependent on them. She's 31, and the last time I talked to her a few months back, she still lived with them. Story 24. My dad would lock me in the house like it's a prison. He never let me play outside with the other kids. The only time I go outside is when I went to school, and even then he wouldn't let me participate in extracurricular activities. He would always hang around the school. I was such a depressed, lonely child. I had a 9:30 p.m. curfew until I was 19. The only friend I had was my dog. I love that dog so much, but my dad killed him in a drunken and coke-fueled rage. He curb-stomped the dog to death, then hid the body somewhere in the woods where no one would find it. He killed the dog because he said the dog was being violent and aggressive, because it's in the nature of all pit bulls. That's bullshit. My dog was the sweetest, most loving dog ever. He loves everyone and everything. I think he did it because he knew that dog made me happy. On a positive note, my father is currently in prison for 35 years for statutory rape, possession of cocaine, domestic assault, and child abuse. My mom was too afraid to say or do anything. She got so traumatized and depressed she stopped caring about anything, including her son. She is still emotionally scarred, just like me, but we're slowly but surely recovering. Story 25. Yes, I've been waiting for this, so I met my wife on OkCupid. We were about 21 at the time. I came into her life at a bad moment. She was failing classes, anxiety-prone, etc. Eventually, she got asked to take a leave of absence from her school. Against my better advice, she didn't tell her parents, went back to the school to pack up her stuff and figure out what her next move was. Well, her parents found out within that next day or so, and her dad flew some odd 1,000 miles to get her and go back home. But this was the next thing. They cut her off from the world. She couldn't go out of the house unless it was to the schools that they enrolled her in to get her back in good standing. She dropped off the face of the earth. Her mom spent time writing all of her friends pretending to be her, stating that they could not be friends and that she was moving on with her life. Her mom did the same to me. Eventually, I got a hold of her, and we had a talk secret for months on end. We started dating, and she graduated, and we kept talking. Well, she finally moves out her parents' house and comes to visit me some 1,000 miles away. Her parents cut her cell phone off. When she gets back to her hometown, they demand she comes over. They confiscate some items of hers that I gave her and told her to never speak to me again. That doesn't work, of course. Eventually we say it, because they are bat crazy. We're talking to mother mailing me that she knew who many managers were and could call them and let them some craziness and get married. When we finally tell them, which is like a month or 2 after it happens, the mom played the victim like we didn't even give her the chance to get to know me and to like me. And I'm just like, you impersonated your daughter. and told me that you wanted nothing to do with me. Your daughter told you that we would be together, and you threatened to disown her. As you could see, this completely works me up. Nonetheless, now, the mother refuses to speak either of us, has manipulated the ball-less father into not speaking to his own child, and the teenage younger sister thinks that my wife is the world's most awful person for choosing to live her life for sake. When I was doing freshman orientation years ago at college, the tour guide told a story when we got to the dorms. The head RA for a freshman dorm got a knock on her office door about 2-ish months into the first semester. Right before midterms, a girl walked in and asked what was the longest amount of time guests were allowed to stay in the room. The RA told her can't remember the amount of days, and the girl says that her roommate's mother had been living in the room since move-in weekend. Holy, no. Story 26, I was friends in high school with this kid. We'll call him Zach. Zach's parents were super Christian and conservative. They never let him play video games or watch anything other than kids' shows. They also refused to let him go to ed. When he was 19, he called me in the middle of the night because his girlfriend wanted pads for her period, but he had no idea what those were. If they found out he had played video games at a friend's house, they would ground him. He wasn't allowed to be out anywhere after 7, unless he was with his parents. When he was 19 and living away from his parents, they called him and demanded he stop talking to his gay friend. The end result was the most sheltered, ignorant human being I have ever met. Don't even get me started on the parents themselves. They never got him vaccinated and barely went to the doctor themselves. They were anti-abortion, gay rights, not just marriage, rights, and anti-immigration. Once they found out me and my family were Muslim, they tried their best to keep me and their son separated. Story 27, my mother signed me out of high school, and I was not allowed out of the house for almost 2 years. She quit her job and was convinced the Asian mafia was going to kill us. I wasn't allowed near windows to get the mail, nothing, but my siblings came and went as they pleased. To this day, I do not understand. Story 28, kid I went to high school with was constantly grounded, and for really dumb things as far as I could tell. He hardly got to come out and do stuff around the neighborhood. It seemed pretty crazy at the time, but I guess not psycho based on what I know can happen. Story 29, my boss has a baby and a 4-year-old, and they're super overprotective, like the 4-year-old still sleeps in their bed with them and the baby, and they haven't left either kid alone with another person ever. Sometimes he talks about how they've never been out since the kids, like I can relate. I have a pair myself, but we still live our lives. The 4-year-old went to preschool, so the mom went with him and sat in the class every day, and even sat at his table and played with him instead of letting him interact with peers. One time they were in the office, and my boss hand-fed him food because he didn't want the kid handling the food himself, since the kid had recently touched the computer. Recently, he was describing their garden and how the food at the back never gets picked because we can't go back there ever because of the baby. No, I have no idea. You live on a small fence lot in the suburbs. What are you afraid of getting to your baby if you walk out to the corner of your yard? The worst part is he's constantly telling me how tired he is and how his kids never sleep. But it's probably because they're all sleeping in the same bed, waking each other up all the time. Both of my kids were in their own room by a couple of months old, and it made life so much easier. When they're in the room with you, you notice every little noise. Story 30, well, there's this new popular post making the rounds on Facebook about how, when on the street, you must carry your child in your arms at all times. Never let him walk. Not even if you're holding his hand or on a leash, as it makes them too easy targets for snatching. And obviously never take them out to play. You'd have to let them do stuff, and it's too dangerous. It also has a couple extra interesting advice. You should make posts of any person that seems to be lingering about. They're probably kidnappers looking at your kids. I've also seen several posts of random people on stores because someone thought they looked suspicious. More so if they're males buying stuff that only women are supposed to buy, like fabrics or cleaning supplies. If you ever lose sight of your child, immediately consider it a kidnapping. Edit looking for the post. In the meantime, this is the new warning, sorry. It's in Spanish, but it tells you to never go to the supermarket alone with your kids ages 1 through 20. Always bring along the father, as you can't be constantly holding him since you might need to let go of him to push the cart or grab stuff. Edit 2, print this page to add your child's personal info, fingerprints, and some hair clips for DNA identification. Carry it with you always to have everything ready if your child is kidnapped. Story 31, live in Midwest, and have several. One 12-year-old girl lives next door to me. For our summer block party, the parents drive 4 houses up the street to attend. At sunset, the wife screamed murder at their daughter to stop playing so they could go home and put on long sleeves pants and prevent mosquito bites. It was like 100 degrees out, so I'd choose bug bites over pants and long sleeves any day. Mosquitoes can also bite though clothes, so I'm not sure what they were solving. Drove her back to house 4 houses down, changed, then came back. Same wife made her husband leave about 1 hour after they returned because he had had 3 beers over 5 hours, and she doesn't allow him to have more than three. 2. A girlfriend parents were very strict, not religious. Just crazy. They would only let her ride her bike around in their yard regardless of age, because there was a highway nearby. This was in rural Missouri, about 2 hours from a major city, in a town of about 2,000 people. The highway was MPH rural highway that has hardly anybody driving on it. My parents are super strict with me. I am the youngest of three. There's an age gap of 12 and 10 between my older siblings and I. My parents were not really strict with my older siblings as they are with me. I can understand why, because my sister ran off and got married and pregnant. She is now in an abusive relationship that is very much poisonous. My brother is clinically depressed and spends his days at work or in his room. I understand the reasons why my parents want to keep a close leash on me, but sometimes I feel very suffocated. I was not allowed to go to the mall with my friends alone until I was 17 years old. I would always have to beg my parents to let me go to the school dances and school events. My brother and my sister even agree with my parents about not letting me go anywhere. I feel like this way of living has taken a toll on my life. I live in America, and I would always see my friends hanging out with each other at the mall or at a restaurant. They would post it on Facebook and would always wish that it was me who was able to hang out with friends. I would just lay in bed all day and not do anything productive. Eventually, when I did start going out with friends, my mom would only let me leave for 3 hours at a time. She would start calling me and blowing not only my phone, but also my friend's phone. I was really embarrassed, so I just never went out. I developed anxiety from this, which I still suffer from. Bottom line, let your kids have some fun and just trust them that they're going to do the right thing. Story 32. A friend of mine had very overprotective and religious parents. He didn't have a door on his bedroom or bathroom. When you went over there, you had to take your shoes and socks off. I understand shoes, but how are socks any more dirty than bare feet? He never got dropped anywhere either. Always had mom or dad there. Story 33. Around the middle of my first semester of college, I lost my phone. I noticed it was missing around when I got back to my dorm. Thinking that I left it in one of my classrooms, I called it from a friend's phone. A classmate who lives off campus had found it. He took it home because he knew it was mine and was going to give it back next Monday during class. And that was that. I would get my phone on Monday. So problem solved. Boy, was I wrong, because he turned off the phone after that call. My mother couldn't get a hold of me. My mom, being my mom, assumed I was dead in a crack house after doing too many drugs. The lunatic took a plane and flew from Panama to D.C. just so she could make sure I was okay halfway across the continent, just so she could ask one question. Keep in mind, my best friend and 4 other high school friends were attending the same college as me and lived in the same dorm building as me, and she had all their phone numbers. Also, to make matters worse, that was not the last time she took an 8-hour flight just to make sure I was okay. Story 34. Oh, I got one right for this one. I've mentioned it before in some other threads, but I just can't get over how batshit insane this woman is. A good friend of mine has lived with his grandparents his whole life. It's just his grandma now, and she's insanity turned to 11. I've known this guy since high school. It took 4 years before I was allowed to go into his house because his grandma didn't like the fact I have long hair. She didn't want a hippie in the house. When he did leave the house, she would call around 8 to 9 p.m. and ask when he's going to be home. While I use ask loosely, it was more like pestering him that he needs to get home. She continues to call every 30 minutes or so. There's been no repercussions from him completely ignoring this, though. When she goes out of the house, he has to go with her. I understand she may have fear of going out alone, and that's probably bolstered a bit by her watching of Fox News, but they live in a very, very low crime area. There's been 1 shooting in the last decade, no muggings, armed robberies of people, and the only thing the cops really have to respond to are people stealing from Walmart. His car got totaled 2 years ago. He still doesn't have another one because she won't let him save the money to get another one. He always has to pay vast majority of bills and rent, despite her being fully able to pay her share as well. He can't just refuse because she'll eventually kick him out, and that threat holds more weight now since he doesn't have a car. He's using hers to go back and forth to work. Several years back, we went on vacation, and she told us not to go to a place that was on our agenda because it was a bad area. We told her we wouldn't, of course. We did anyway, and surprise, not a single problem at all. Can't have any alcohol. He sneaks it in anyway. Has to leave the door to his room open, and no bad language. In all honesty, she treats him like a 12-year-old. He's in his upper 20s. Story 35. I already said something about the family in a previous thread, but I still have a good answer in sweet karma. Am I right? Anyway, there was this family of 2 parents and 4 kids that had the most overprotective health nut mom ever, and she also was a very strict conservative Christian. Their dad wasn't the same way, but he pretty much allowed her to be strict like she was. She wouldn't let her kids do things that most normal kids were allowed to do, like eat any food that wasn't organic and wholesome. She believed that GMO and HCF caused bad problems later in life. She also hated microwaves and wouldn't let her kids use them. Watch anything with any hint of the supernatural that didn't have to do with God. So that meant no Disney princesses, no Star Wars, no Harry Potter, no Lord of the Rings, no celebrating Christmas or Halloween. Those are pagan holidays, no violence or swearing or in anything. My friend from that family had a GameCube with a few games on it. He used to have Super Smash Bros. Melee, but his mom took Smash Bros. Because it was too violent for him. I feel sorry for her kids. I know the oldest boy is going to be far from the perfect kid his mom wants him to be, and the girls will probably follow suit. I know when I have kids, I will not be the same way. Story 36. I used to work in the post office of a university. We would encounter helicopter parents from time to time. I remember getting a phone call from some student's mother. She wanted to understand our procedures in detail, what happens when a student gets a package that's too big to fit in his mailbox, etc. After much discussion, I asked her, "Why do you need to know this?" Turns out she wanted to know, so she could explain to her son. I also took a phone call from another mother who listed a lot of rambling complaints about the university, most of which shouldn't have concerned me in the first place, because they had nothing to do with my department. But one of her allegations was that her daughter had been harassed while working in the cafeteria. I figured this was serious, so I wrote down the details and reported it to my boss, who made some inquiries. It turns out the university had already heard this story from the mother, but had not taken any action because the student herself had refused to file a complaint. Only the mother had complained. So now, the mother, after having already complained and not getting satisfaction for good reason, had decided to repeat her complaint to the post office. Story 37. My friend's mom. They're great people, and I love them like a second family. But she was overprotective. 4th grade, his mom cut the tail off of the Nightcrawler action figure I got him for his birthday for being demonic. 5th grade, she throws away the medieval Spawn action figure I got him for being Spawn. High school, she throws away the vintage Faster Pussycat shirt I gave him. His dad's cool though. Head watch Beavis, and with us when we were 10, my sister was by far the worst I've ever met. She was a typical shitty teenager in high school doing the whole I'm 17. I'm grown, you can't tell me what to do thing, including drinking, drugs, and none of which I have any problem with, but probably aren't a good idea if you don't possess the responsibility to deal with them. She got knocked up at 17 by a dude who bailed on her, and she took about 1.5 tons of reality to the face and decided to turn her life around. Problem is, she swung too far back in the other direction and became a super fundamentalist Christian and shocked her getting knocked up by a transient Mexican farm worker and literally everything else to God's plan. After my nephew was born, things didn't start to get bad until he was around 7 or 8 and developed his own personality. She started forcing him to go to church and catechism against his wishes. She also severely restricted the information and media he was allowed access to. Books were restricted solely to the Bible and other religious texts and educational books, so long as they didn't contradict Scripture in any way. She refused to allow him to have friends unless Shed vetted them and ensured they came from a good Christian family. Until he was 16, the only television he was allowed to watch was Disney Channel and CNN. She put parental block on everything else. He wasn't allowed to see movies rated above PG or get his driver's license until he was 18, and she couldn't really stop him anymore. Video games were right out of the question. The end result of his sheltered upbringing was that, as soon as he was a legal adult, he began to rebel against everything Shed ever imposed on him in whatever way he could find. He started drinking and doing drugs, stopped going to church or any of the religious studies groups she made him go to, and fell in with a group of guys who got him in a fair amount of trouble. Thankfully, he's calmed down recently, in his early 20s. He's in college now, still drinks and smokes weed, but not nearly as much as he used to, and to my knowledge, hasn't committed a crime in a few years.